Good evening, everybody, and welcome to George Harry Leela Hall. Thank you all for coming this evening. I have such a great pleasure in introducing these wonderful monks, Swamis, Swami Ramanandaji and Swami Vidyanandaji. They have both studied with Gurudev for a long time. Both, one started in 1972 and the other one in 1974 with Swami Sotogrande, and then they both became initiated into monkhood, sannyas you call it, around 1983, 1984. And they've traveled all over the world, serving, loving, giving, teaching. They've done many teacher training programs, and they travel everywhere. Where else have you gone that I've missed out? You've run San Francisco Ashram,
New York IYI,
in New York IYI,
Montreal.
So they've run lots of ashrams. But the most important thing is they have dedicated their lives to service, to give us knowledge. And I think spiritual knowledge is the best gift any of us can get in this world. You know, once we were talking to Gurudev, who's our master, Sri Swami Sotogrande, and you know, I said, Gurudev, what do we do with our life? He said, you know, Nelly, when you do charity, you feed people for that day, just for that one day. But when you give them spiritual knowledge, you feed them for a lifetime. So I'd like to thank them for coming all the way to be with us for a few days and share their time and their knowledge with us. Welcome, Swami, please. Welcome.
Great to be here. Love the baby. Thank you for bringing the baby. That's a blessing to all of us. We're going to do a little chant just so we get to sync up with all of you. We're just going to do a simple Hari Om chant. Hari Om takes your energy if you're a little tired, late in the day, you've been working, and the Ha gives your solar plexus a little kick to raise your energy up. Then the Ri opens up your throat, and the Om moves up higher. So the meaning of it is simply, may all obstacles be overcome. Something I wish for all of you, something I wish for all of us. So try to feel the sound moving through your body, opening you up, waking you up, and opening you up to inspiration and many blessings. All right? We'll chant call and response. I'll chant a line and then we'll repeat it together. If you don't sing very well, please chant louder. It's not about music, it's about feeling the vibration moving through your body, okay? We'll start with Om together. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari 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 Om.
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 Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Hari Om.
Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Hari Om.
Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari 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 Om.
Hari 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 Om.
Hari 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 Om.
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 Hari Om, Hari Om.
Hari Om, Hari Om.
Hari Om, Hari Om. Hari 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 Om.
Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari 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 Om.
Hari Hari
Hari Hari Hari Hari Hari Hari Hari Om.
Hari 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 Om.
Hari 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 Om.
Hari Om, Hari Om, 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 Hari Hari Om.
Hari Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat.
Welcome. We are so happy to be here and share some thoughts with you about stress management. It's something that we both became interested in, and we started teaching together, and we saw that there was so much that we could say about it and so much to learn. And eventually we developed a program to train yoga teachers to teach yoga as stress management, to take the teachings and practices of yoga and apply them to people living in any kind of situation, working in a hospital or business, university or senior center, to teach people who are experiencing stress how to use yoga to work with that stress. Not just to relieve it, which yoga does very well, but also to learn to cope with it more carefully, more mindfully, so that they're less affected by the situations that we think of as stressful. So we began working together about 20 years ago, and have been teaching it ever since. We just finished teaching a group in Portugal, at Quinta de Calma. Some of you may be familiar with that place, not far from here. So it's very fresh in our minds, this topic. And one of the things that we like to examine when we look at the whole topic of stress and stress management is, what exactly do we mean by that? It's, for many people, a vague combination of experiences, situations, emotional reactions, and physical feelings that we get from a stressful situation. And it can be useful just to understand a little more thoroughly what all goes on when we experience stress, and what can we do about it? What are our choices? How can we learn to manage it? Not just relieve it, because if we only learn how to relieve stress, then we may have to relieve it again and again and again, unless we understand what's causing it in the first place. So these are the kind of things we've been thinking a lot about. And our Gurudev, Swami Sotogrande, so beautifully gave us so many different practical tools and teachings that can be used to work with stress in a healthy, mindful way. So just to kind of begin to look at this topic and how broad it is, I thought it would be interesting to ask people here, just randomly, anyone, what kind of situation do you experience as stressful? Anyone? Traffic, okay. Heavy traffic in particular.
Anybody there with her? I am.
Being negative.
Being negative.
Yeah.
When you're negative.
Yeah.
Sometimes when another person's being negative also, that can be stressful.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Work demands.
Yeah, work
Starting any
demands.
company.
Yeah. And then if there's home demands also, right? Work demands and home demands. Yeah.
Other people.
Other people. Yeah.
The technical things go wrong, which is quite a lot.
Yeah, good.
When you're late and it's out of your control.
When you're late and it's out of your control.
Moving.
Moving. Yeah. moving
major
from one home to
stressor.
another. Yeah, sure.
Divorce.
Divorce,
Very, very high on the list.
that's another
Stressors.
great example. Yeah. All these things, what do they have in common? They're all to some degree out of our control. Right? You can't make traffic change, right? We all wish we could, right? You can't just simply transport yourself to another place, right? You can't control what happens in a relationship. You can't always control technology, no matter how much you prepare ahead of time, right? There's so many things that we can't really control. Our work situation, we often are not in control of that. So it's interesting for us to see that the things we consider stressful are things that are either new experiences for us, or they're overwhelming in some way, or they're out of our control, or all three. Like moving to a new home, to a new place. That's something new that you're not sure is going to work out, right? You're leaving something that was familiar to something that's not familiar. So we see these kind of characteristics. And if these things happen in many different areas of our lives, then we might experience a lot of stress. All right? So you might experience stress on the way to work in the traffic. You might experience stress at work with the work itself. And then when you come home, stress with the person that you find at home. Right? So then there's a lot of stress happening. And something that we know if we understand this, what we call the physiology of stress or the stress response, is that it's a beautiful system that's set up in us to help us escape real danger, life-threatening danger. Most of us aren't chased by a bear on a regular basis or in danger of being assaulted or run over or anything like that. But occasionally, when something like that happens, we're grateful for the spontaneous burst of energy to escape some kind of danger. Right? The problem becomes when these same kind of physiological reactions, the increased heart rate, the blood pressure rising, the kind of diminishing of the digestive enzymes and the immune system in order to be able to run or mobilize ourselves and do something like, it's often called fight or flight response, right, in the United States, because we either run or fight. Right? But when all of these physiological reactions happen in these kind of everyday situations, the system isn't meant for that. Right? It's not built to react to stress in a kind of daily way. Right? But of course, our bodies don't know the difference between a traffic jam and a bear. Right? They react the same way. Right? You can feel your adrenaline rising, especially if you're going to be late for a meeting. What were you telling earlier today, Shanti? That the border they were stopping everyone?
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. So something like that happens and you're late for work or a meeting of some kind or something important to you, then you get the same kind of reaction, physical reaction. And that can cause a lot of problems. It can be very unhealthy for us. Right? So that's one aspect of stress, is the kinds of things that bring it up and the way that we tend to react. And Vidyanandaji is going to speak a little bit more about what is it that we experience when that happens.
Basically, when you look at how people teach and explain the stress cycle, something happens. You've named many commonplace occurrences. And our mind says, uh-oh, I can't control this situation, right? This is somehow a threat to my well-being. It can be a physical threat, but very often it's just a threat to what you perceive to be your well-being. Getting caught in traffic and you have no control over it, or a difficult relationship that just seems to be, stressing you all the time, and you really have no control over it. And it's perceived as a threat. The mind says, uh-oh, threat. And immediately it gets translated into the body. It gets translated into the physical form. And the adrenals start kicking out stress hormones and all the reactions Ramananda said. Your heart starts beating faster, the blood gets thicker. That's in case the bear catches you and injures you. If the blood is thicker, you won't bleed out, right? If you're injured, you don't bleed out. But chronic stress, day-to-day stress, your heart is beating stronger and the blood is thicker. That's a recipe for high blood pressure. And over time, that will take its toll on your heart, right? And on your whole circulatory system. So chronic stress starts in the mind, winds up in the body. And the body's the one that starts to pay the price. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Most of us, when we get stressed, there's some part of the body that just takes a break or breaks down, right? Me, I stop digesting food. That's it. Can't eat, I eat something, it just sits there. How many of you know kind of where your body's gonna kick out on you if you have some stress, yeah? Can you point to some place? Most of you know.
Yeah.
What's the difference between stress and depression?
Depression, oh, that's a very good question. Your mind reacts to stress immediately. Danger. It says danger. The next thing that reacts is actually your emotions. And you'll either feel usually fear or anger. Long term, because we're not in situations where we complete the stress cycle. That is to say, if a bear were to attack you, you would either fight it or run away. If you didn't survive, no problem. No more taxes. You're completely safe. If you do escape, no problem. No more bear. So either way, you're fine. But that's the completion. You do some behavior, right? But you feel fear of the bear or anger if the bear's attacking your baby, right? My God, you would fight like a lioness if God forbid, something were to attack your infant. You're programmed that way. Nature wisely programmed you that way. The problem comes when we can't, your boss is giving you a hard time, and you don't hit him and run screaming out of the room. You don't fight or flee, right? You would definitely be out on the street without a job if you did that on a regular basis. You don't complete the cycle, and it starts to break down. And long term, the natural fear and anger, because they're thwarted again and again to complete the cycle and feel safe, turns into depression. Does that make sense? Your whole system, your immune system gets depressed, your mental resilience gets depressed. And there's more to it than that. Sadness, well, you know what, the Mayo Clinic in the US, a very good research clinic, defines depression as sadness plus feeling bad about yourself. Self-deprecation. Sadness alone is not depression. Sadness is a normal reaction to a situation where you feel some loss. But if you also if you feel bad about yourself, that's when it turns into depression. The thing about chronic stress, and this is with studies of post-traumatic stress disorder, your normal resilience to handle the situation gets thwarted again and again. And you start to feel on some level like you just can't handle things. You can't, and that's when the sadness that you feel over loss or whatever it is turns into depression. So that's a long answer.
How do you get out of it?
Pardon me?
How do you get out of it?
Yeah, that's what the next hour and a half, that's what we're going to talk about. So just for fun, why don't you take like 1 minute each, turn to one person and just tell them anything safe and comfortable for you about how your body responds to stress. We're just going to take a minute, it's a little icebreaker. So stress starts in the mind, but it winds up in the body. The brilliant idea of yoga is you'd think, okay, it starts in the mind. Maybe I should try to cut through my stress at the level of the mind by somehow controlling my mental, emotional reaction. But how easy is it to say, I'm just not going to be upset about this traffic jam and my nasty boss and the fact that I'm late, and then you're fine. Is that easy? No. Whereas if you say, I'm going to stretch, I'm going to breathe, and I'm going to pay attention to how it feels, that you have some control over, right? You can intervene where it shows up last, which is in the physical body. And that is just an absolutely brilliant way to cut through stress. I was reading an article on stress management years ago, and it was by a Dr. Jeff Midgau. I don't know the research, but he was an MD, and he made this quote: 30 seconds of stretching, breathing, and noticing how it feels is enough to cut through the physiological response to stress. 30 seconds. Isn't that inspiring? I've read other things that say a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. But for sure, in 30 seconds to 3 minutes, with stretching, breathing, and noticing how it feels, the adrenals stop kicking out that high level of stress hormones. The heart starts to calm down. The blood starts to come back to your digestion. So we always do, no matter, even though tonight we're talking a little bit more about the mental applications, we still want to show you some really good, really quick stress buster stretches, because let's make it practical and easy. The last thing you want is to be stressed out by your stress management technique. No adding stress. So here's a fun one. This one you can do when you're in the traffic jam. Do you know the lion pose? The lion pose? I'm going to teach you all anyway. This is a fun one. You'll excuse me, I'm going to stick my tongue out at you. But anyway, the lion pose goes like this. You take a deep breath. You lean forward, you splay your fingers. You can do it sitting down in a chair. You can do it sitting down. You splay your fingers as if they're lion's claws. You roar and you stick your tongue out. Don't roar so loud that you hurt your throat. Just a nice, healthy roar. And you look up like this, like scaring, like you're, those Tibetan masks of demons to scare someone off. So I'm going to demo.
What if somebody sees you at a traffic light?
They are not going to get in your way. They are not going to cut you off. Yeah, you're at a traffic light, you have your fingers hooked up and you're just and you feel so much better. So you don't have to, but if you want to, we're going to do it together, right? That's a 30-second one. And then I'll tell you why, and we'll do a little exercise afterwards. So take a deep breath. Good job. Good help. Let's do one more and notice how you feel. Oh, she's taking photos. This will take photos behind them, facing us. No, I'll face them. Yeah. All right, ready? Now stop for a moment. You just sit and relax your hands. You just stretch them. Feel like you just dropped a big load of stress out of your hands. Relax your hands. And then notice how your tongue feels. You stretched it and you roared. Notice your tongue and relax it from the tip of the tongue, down the center, down the throat, and then sides of the tongue, down the sides, down the throat, and then the whole tongue. Just let go of it. You can sort of feel it tingling. Then notice your eyes. And you see, because you stretched your eyes by looking up and crossing them, the muscles around the eyes feel more relaxed. And just focus on relaxing those muscles around the eyes. Then just take a moment and rotate your awareness between your hands, your tongue, and your eyes, letting go of them again and again. Then gently you can bring your awareness back to the room. Could you feel that your hands and tongue and eyes were more relaxed after stretching? And did it feel sort of calming just to notice that they were more relaxed? The thing about the hands, the tongue, and the eyes is they're all directly connected to the brain and the mind. The eyes, developmentally as a fetus, develop out of brain tissue. The retina of the eye, the part that registers light, is a specialized outcropping of the brain itself. And as such, it's made of brain tissue and nervous tissue. So when you stretch your eyes and then consciously relax them, relaxing your poor brain and your poor nervous system. And your tongue, when you're worrying about things, you're probably not aware of it, but as you think thoughts in words, your tongue is very subtly moving with the words. And when you stretch and relax your tongue, it starts to help the repetitive patterns of talking to yourself negatively to let go, just to start to loosen their grip. When you think of doing something, especially if you want to fight or, handle a problem, you're very often going to do it with your hands. Type a nasty letter or, do something. The mind, the brain and the hands have such a direct link because so much of what we think to do, we do with the hands. So when you quickly stretch the eyes, the tongue, and the hands, and then just take 30 seconds to relax the hands, the tongue, and the eyes, it's a very, very quick stress buster. Very quick. You can't always roar out loud. You can go in the toilet, close the door, and go, flush the toilet. You'll still get the benefit. So that's a quick one. You want to do a little chair stretch?
Sure. Yeah, there are infinite ways to do this, and probably everybody can find one. Here's something that we could do that you could do right at your desk, right? And no one would complain or think you're weird, right?
Though we know we are. You're here, right?
Now, if you just take a moment, even where you are now, to give a little attention to your posture, think of sitting up erect, as if your head would float upward. And then think of rolling your shoulders one way, up, back, down, and then perhaps the other way, up, back, down. And then relax the shoulders. And you may be able, if you focus on it, you may be able to let the shoulders release downward a little more. We often unconsciously hold them. You can let the upper arms release right down alongside the torso, alongside the ribs. And you can do something similar with the hips and legs. If you just move your leg one at a time, perhaps one way and then the other. And you can also move the ankle joint and the other leg. And then let your feet be flat on the floor. Then let's do something with the hands where we bring the hands together in front of the face. And with an inhale, draw the hands back behind you, the elbows draw back. Lift the heart and look upward. And with an exhale, draw the hands back together. And with an inhale, once more. And exhale, the hands together. And once more. And exhale together. And then lower the hands. And then close your eyes and take a few deeper breaths, whatever way you know. deepen the breath so that you feel it. Perhaps you may feel the abdomen expand as you first inhale. Feel the rib cage expand. And when you really inhale deeply, you may feel the inhalation move all the way into the upper chest. And let the exhalation be as long and slow as it will through the nose. After one more deep inhalation, slow exhalation, relaxing the hands on the thighs or wherever they're comfortable. Let the breath return to normal. And notice how subtle the breath becomes when you don't control it. Let it fall into its own natural rhythm. And then just notice how the body feels in general. See if you can consciously soften the abdomen. Consciously relax the shoulders. And consciously relax the jaw and the eyes. Back. Perhaps open your eyes if they're closed. So simple movements like this, where we pay attention to the movement and coordinate the movement with the breath, are again a way of interrupting the tendency to get stressed or tight or anxious and automatically shifting gears in our system to return to a more relaxed state. And when we train ourselves to do this, when we practice it regularly, something like this, even for a few minutes like that, then we develop the habit of learning how to pause and breathe and recenter ourselves. Because, let's face it, it's not just once a day that we need to kind of come back into balance. Right? Since we get sometimes anxious or disturbed or worried or upset, sometimes numerous times in a day, it's a beautiful habit to develop. Before I begin a new project, when I really want to focus, can I calm myself down? Can I breathe slowly? Let the body be more relaxed. When you breathe deeply, this abdominal area that often gets affected by stress gets relaxed. This area is where I feel tension when I'm stressed and anxious. Right? That gets relaxed. Brain gets relaxed when we relax the eyes. So simple practices like this, they have the effect, especially when we're focusing our attention, they have the effect of calming everything down. And then we can be much more effective in deciding what to do about stress. Shall I talk about that, or you want to?
I just want to say two really quick things. Research has shown that deep breathing, deep, slow, relaxed breathing, is physiologically incompatible with the state of stress arousal. That is to say, it brings in the relaxation response as opposed to the stress response. So deep, relaxed breathing, done consciously, is your most portable form of stress management. You don't even have to take the time to stretch. You can be in the middle of a heated argument with someone. Not that any of you ever does that. But if someone were ever angry at you, then you just breathe deeply, and it helps right in that moment to cut through your stress physiologically. So that's a real important, even if that's all you remember from tonight, it's more than worth coming out for that. The other thing is there are abundant videos on YouTube of chair yoga classes, some strenuous, some very simple. They're in all languages. Have some fun. Go out, find ones that feel relaxing to you, look for them, and just try them. Just all you need is 3 or 4 in your repertory that work for you. And the good thing is when you start to do it consciously, you'll find that you'll unconsciously just start to stretch at your desk when you're feeling tight. You don't even think about it anymore. You just find yourself stretching at your desk. That is just a wonderful habit. So.
Perfect. That's one of the things that we've seen is so important. When a stressful situation happens and we find ourselves getting really anxious or worried or angry, we can't expect to have this capacity to handle it really well, carefully, mindfully, unless we've built a habit of learning how to be more careful. Right? Otherwise, we tend to do something very hasty that often makes things worse. Right? Have you ever experienced that? Oh my gosh, I've been through it so many times. Right? So yoga has helped us understand that by practicing regularly, building a habit of learning how to pause and breathe and recenter ourselves, then that habit comes in handy. And it's something we not only work with physically, but we can work with mentally as well. And that's what we'll talk about now, when we talk about using some of the teachings from yoga in addition to these practices. So the teachings of yoga help us work with the mental aspect of our experience of stress. Something that Vidyanandaji said before. Stress begins in the mind in a way with how we interpret the event. Right? If you've experienced before moving many times or having difficulty with your boss many times, you may be used to it, it may be familiar, and it's not such a big deal to you. Or something that may be not such a big deal to you might be terribly traumatic or challenging to someone else. Right? Everybody tends to respond differently to different things. Right? I could tell you all that we're going parachuting later, and some of you might be so frightened and others might be excited to go. Right? Isn't it true that everyone will respond a little differently according to what state of mind you're in? I can give a little example from my life. Some years ago when I lived in New York, I was officiating at a wedding. We got in a taxi to go to the wedding, and the traffic was terrible. And I think I could have walked faster, but it was quite a distance, so I assumed the traffic would change, but it never did. I got so anxious because I thought, oh, what are they going to think? I'm officiating at the wedding, and I'm not even there. I'm going to be late. As I realized more and more I'm going to be late, I felt terrible. Right? How can I do this to my friends? I'm late to their wedding. And I was anxious the whole time. Meanwhile, the other people in the taxi cab with me, they're relaxing, joking. What could they do? They couldn't change anything, so they stayed relaxed. I got so disturbed. My heartbeat rate, all the things we talked about. My heart rate increasing, anxious, breathing shallow. We got to the wedding, and everyone else that was coming to the wedding was in the same kind of traffic, and we couldn't start the wedding for another half an hour. So all that I went through was all up here. It never really existed. So one of the teachings of yoga that we like to relate to anyone is how it's in a way a principle from what's called Jnana yoga. Right? Have you heard of Jnana yoga? And the principle is simple, that especially when we cannot control the situation outside, we can learn that the one thing we do have control over is how I view that situation. I can make a conscious choice to relate to this situation differently if if I'm aware of what's happening, if I see what my mind is doing, I can pause and breathe and think about, what shall I do? What would be a good choice in this situation, right? My boss is screaming at me. I already have too much to do. What are my choices here? Right? If I simply get upset and yell something that I'll regret later, that's no help, right? I might even make the situation worse. But if I'm able to slow down and actually observe what's happening in myself, this is Jnana Yoga, where we become more and more aware of what's happening in our own minds, as well as what's in our bodies, and we become aware of what's happening in the world around us, the situation around us. Right? So Jnana Yoga is a way of cultivating this ability to witness or observe what's happening to me and what's happening around me. And as soon as I'm more aware of what's happening around me and what's happening inside of me, then I have the potential to think about what I can do about it. And that's a huge difference, right? When I'm angry, to expect ourselves never to get angry or worried, forget it, not going to happen. But to be aware that I'm angry or worried, that's already a big difference. Because as soon as I'm aware of it, I can think about what to do with that anger. If I'm really angry at someone and I'm tempted to say something spiteful, right, that will hurt them and ultimately hurt me, that I'll regret later, I might do better just to walk away, right? But that's much better. And I could only make that choice if I'm seeing what's happening as it's happening, right? So this is Jnana Yoga practice, taking the position of an observer. Instead of talk about it, let's actually do a little bit. Are you game to try that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're a willing audience. So, sit in your chair comfortably. Ideally, we sit erect. We'll just do this for a few minutes. See if you can make any shift in your position so you can be relaxed. And close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that. Otherwise, you can just look downward. And then take a few deep breaths again. And observe your breath as you're breathing deeply. See what part of the body moves. See if the breath's moving in the lower part of the torso, in the rib cage, in the upper chest. Just observe it. And then see how it moves when you exhale. And then relax the breath again. It keeps observing where the breath moves when you inhale and exhale. It may be subtle, but see if you can be acutely aware. What's moving when you inhale? What moves when you exhale? And now we'll turn this observing intention to the mind and thoughts. Can you take the position of an observer by standing back from your own mind and thoughts? Just like you would stand on the banks of a stream and watch the water flow in front of you. When a thought comes up, envision that thought like a leaf on the stream and let it flow by in front of you. If you get wrapped up in your thoughts, come back to standing apart as the observer and letting them float by like leaves on the stream. Let them go. See what else comes. another moment. Keep practicing this way. Each thought, let it float by. Enjoy seeing all of them as a witness without dwelling on any one of them. And then can you turn your attention to the part of you that is the witness, that's the observer? Just see what it feels like to turn your attention, to be aware of the place in you that can witness, that can be aware, but not lost in the thoughts. And then open your eyes when you're ready. So it's an interesting practice because normally we so much get wrapped up in all of our thinking that whatever we think about, we get sort of absorbed in it, and it feels like all that we are. Have you experienced that before? Like, I had that thought, I'm late to the wedding, I feel terrible about it. I was completely lost in that way of thinking. I'll tell you another little story. Again, when I was living in New York some years ago, I remember coming back from having dinner with someone, coming back to the Institute, thinking to myself, oh boy, I ate too much. And look what time it is. It's much later than I intended to come back. And tomorrow I have a big day. And I know if I eat too much and stay out too late, then I don't sleep as well. And then my meditation isn't good in the morning. It's usually not as clear and focused. Right? And I have a big day tomorrow. Ah, I've ruined it. And this was going through my mind for a few minutes as I walked back, thinking, ah, you idiot. Why did you do that? Right? You know better. Scolding myself and just unhappy about what I'd done and what was going to happen. And then suddenly I caught myself. What am I doing? It didn't happen. Nothing happened yet. Okay, so I ate so much. It's not such a big deal, right? What is it to be worried about? That's not going to help, right? So I just started to relax. I have a mantra that I use, right, as a way of calming myself that I meditate with. And I use that mantra regularly, right? So it wasn't that hard for me to think about my mantra because it's something that I practice every day. So I thought, let me just repeat my mantra. Right? Most of you know what a mantra is probably. It's a phrase, right, that I use as a way of calming myself down, calming my mind. So I started to repeat my mantra. The reason I remember the story is simply because I slept fine, my meditation was fine, and nothing was wrong. And I just saw, wow, this time, unlike the wedding situation, this time I somehow caught myself and I saw, this is what I'm doing to myself. Yes, I'm in a situation, but it's not terrible. It's no reason to get upset. And this was a simple situation. A really stressful situation might be more challenging. But I saw the principle. If I can see what's happening to me as it's happening, I don't have to get lost in it. I don't have to be overwhelmed by it. I can actually pause and think about what do I want to do? What choice do I want to make? Right? Oftentimes, we talked about this before, oftentimes we can't control the situation. We're in the middle of it. We can't make it go away. But we can control what we do, what we think. So I chose to think about something else, and I was fine. it just dissolved. Now, it might not be that easy with some more challenging situations, but it's quite possible. A group of women that I was teaching once back in New York that were working for the same difficult boss, they developed this method where they would use the image from Star Trek of a force field around themselves. Do you know this force field?
Yeah.
Right? It's invisible. You can still see everything. Nobody can see the force field, but the force field prevents the stress. In their minds, the force field that they put up prevented the rude, obnoxious behavior of the boss from affecting them. But it would let through the work assignments. They still receive the work assignments, but they're not receiving the obnoxious behavior. And that was the method that they developed. They consciously choose, not to be upset by something the boss says that's unnecessarily rude and obnoxious, insulting or offensive, not receiving it. I thought it was a beautiful technique. They developed it themselves from, I'm happy to say, from learning about stress management and how they could change and control the way they dealt with that situation. So there's a little example of Jnana Yoga. How we develop this ability to be more aware of what's happening and then make a conscious choice about what to do, rather than be completely lost in it, so lost in it that we have no choice, and we do something hurtful. So there's a little teaching from yoga, and this is how yoga addresses stress, not just to help relieve it, but how to prevent it from getting so bad in the first place. We call this coping with stress. So that's one example of it. I'll ask Vidyananda to continue with something more.
Let me just check. Should we move on to Bhakti for a few minutes, or should I do it? I'll say one thing.
Please, and then talk about Bhakti.
I'm having a real life stress response. I'm staying upstairs with Vimala, and when I came down, I locked the door, thinking she was down. I locked her in.
Oh my God!
I'm sitting here feeling so bad and so guilty because here she is a guest with me, and I'm used to America where you can always you just have a handle of it. So thank God she's Houdini. But I'm sitting here stressing, and it's over. Right? So one Jnana Yoga technique is to ask yourself, is it happening now? Is it happening now? So much of our stress is regretting something really stupid that caused someone else unnecessary stress. It's over. She got out. And I'm sitting here holding on to it, right? Or worried about the future. His wonderful example of being in the car. There's nothing he can do. That's stress about the future. If you just pay attention to your present moment of stress, that's another, you use the Jnana Yoga, you use the mind to cut through what the mind itself is doing to cause you stress. So that's one of my favorites. And we'll come back, we can switch back and forth. We'll do a little Bhakti.
Please.
So Jnana is what you do with the head, and Bhakti is what you do with the heart. Bhakti Yoga practices are about love and devotion and spiritual faith. All of the above, any of the above. Opening up the heart to love is a very powerful stress-reducing technique. And faith in God is a very powerful stress-reducing technique. There's a research scientist at Stanford University in the United States, and he studies stress. That's his specialty. His name is Sapolsky, Robert Sapolsky, and he wrote a wonderful book about stress called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Good book. And one of his conclusions from studying all these different stress management techniques, and this is a quote from him, the belief that everything that happens to you comes from the hand of a loving God and is for your highest good. That is surely the most powerful stress reduction technique. That was his conclusion from studying all these different approaches. And Sapolsky is an atheist. He is an atheist. So there's exactly the opposite predisposition, you could say, from his own. But as a scientist, studying what worked for different people, that was his conclusion. This feeling that whatever happens to you comes from the hand of a loving higher universe, you could call it the universe that loves you, and is somehow for your highest good. And that, if you have that kind of faith, you are indeed blessed. You are indeed blessed. And those of us who have less faith, there are ways to cultivate that in and of themselves are very helpful in combating stress. So I'm going to give you one thing. Swami Sotogrande said, if you don't have faith and you want to develop that kind of living faith, think about everything you've been given. Think about everything life has given you. I mean, look at us in this room. The benefits we have of living in a culture where there's a certain amount of abundance, and probably we're not starving. We're going to do a little exercise right now, just a little exercise to help you to see how to quickly use this idea to help you cut through stress. And that is to think about people worse off than you in the world, and think of all the things you take for granted in your day-to-day life, that you can just spend a moment to be grateful that somehow the universe put you in a situation where you have those advantages. So we're just going to take, just a minute or so. Close your eyes, put yourself in the mindset of someone looking at people less fortunate than you, and think of anything you can and everything you can that you're grateful you've been given. And then gently bring your awareness back to the room. Were you able to think of more than one thing?
Yeah.
Did you have a pretty good list?
Yes.
Do you notice how you feel when you think of those things?
Can I share one?
Yeah.
One of my favorite ones is, I think it's simply amazing that the trees and plants are designed to take carbon dioxide and give off oxygen, which is what we need is oxygen. Like, who thought of that? Whether you believe in God or not, somebody arranged that. Somebody, the universe, nature, I don't know. But then our bodies take this oxygen and transport it to every cell. It's just a miracle to think how all this works. And of course we don't think about that day in, day out, but it is incredible, just to remember.
One of mine is indoor plumbing. I mean that with all my heart. I've never in my life, except if I chose to go camping, ever been without indoor plumbing. And when you think of the world and how people have to struggle to just get drinking water, and here I have not only clean drinking water, but water for bathing, and who gave me that possibility? I didn't choose to be born in a place where I would have indoor plumbing my entire life. Do you see what I mean? And that's why gratitude in itself makes you feel better, but if you really reflect on what you have been given, yes, you've worked hard. Yes, you've made sacrifices. Yes, you've taken what you've been given by the universe and made good things out of it. I'm not denying what we accomplish, but who gave you the intelligence, right? Who gives you the breath? Who put you in a situation where you're not completely disempowered by your culture and you can make things happen? If you take a moment to be grateful and then think back, what did I do to deserve indoor plumbing my entire life? Really, what did I make happen to have indoor plumbing my entire life? So just for fun, turn to somebody that you don't know and just anything you want to share that you feel grateful for, because also it is so, there's something very healing and nurturing about sharing. So we'll just take a minute and share anything you were grateful about.
If you know everybody, then talk to someone.
But it's fun to not talk to the same person you did.
So I'll speak a little bit more about Jnana Yoga. And in some ways, we'll see how all of these different teachings in yoga ultimately come to the same place for the same purpose. One of the benefits of being more aware of what's happening inside of us and around us is then we can consider the choices based on what we can change and what we can't change. I spoke about that already. Also, based on what's important to us and what's not so important to us. Based on what would have a lasting effect and what's not lasting at all. One of my favorite teachings from Swami Sotogrande, Sri Gurudev, was that life should be fun, but the fun should be good quality fun. In other words, if your fun is only temporary, and then it's not so fun afterwards, like a hot fudge sundae, temporarily it's fun, but for me, it's not very fun for hours afterwards, then it's not good quality. It's not good enough. Right? So if you really want good quality fun, it should be lasting. It shouldn't be disappointing or painful, right? At any point. Right? That's one of my favorite teachings. So in this way, Jnana Yoga is sometimes called the path of discrimination. We become more discriminative, more mindful about the choices that we make. Is it important? Is it useful? Is it beneficial? Right? Is it within my control? One of the examples that I love that Gurudev gave to us is the example of a banana. I'm quite sure I read this in his teaching at one point, that suppose you've never seen a banana before and someone gives you one. Well, you won't know what's the part that's useful and what's the part that's not. You might even taste a little bit. If you just get a banana and taste a little bit, what would you think? Not so good. You might let go of the whole thing. Right? But it's useful if you learn to discriminate or discern what's the good part and what's not. Right? And the analogy I like to use that for is to talk about criticism, for example, because that can be something disturbing, upsetting, can make us feel angry, it can make us feel anxious, it can make us feel depressed, right, or sad that someone criticized us. So even the very idea of criticism can sometimes make you a little bit threatened. Do you know what I mean? And some of us automatically are defensive, automatically find ourselves defending ourselves or discounting the criticism. When actually sometimes criticism can be very helpful, right? If you're open to it and if it's given in a loving way, it can be very useful. It can help you do something better. It can make improvements. Right? When we teach our course, we always get feedback from the participants to see how we can make it better. So to me, that's a great example of the banana teaching. Right? If you can be open-minded about the criticism, see what's useful and see what's not, see what's important, right? And see what's not, then you can take the part that's useful and let go of the rest. But of course, that's only possible if you know how to not react automatically, not immediately defend yourself, but you can be a little bit thoughtful. You can be a little, have this tendency to pause and breathe and be thoughtful. Is this helpful? Is this useful for me? Is it true? Only if I'm really open-minded and not reacting automatically can I make that kind of analysis, right? So sometimes Jnana Yoga is called the path of analysis. Right? And it's something that this ability to see, to be aware, comes from regular practice. Right? It's not so easy to observe what's happening inside of ourselves unless we practice. That's why I'm so thankful for a yoga practice, because it helps me sometimes keep from falling into something that's completely unnecessary. Right? Like the wedding story. If it happens again, I'll be much better. I'm quite sure. You want to share something else?
All of yoga ultimately points us to who we really are in our center. And Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Hatha Yoga, all of it is designed to make us aware of the part of ourselves that never changes. That's the witness that Swami Ramananda was talking about. Everything else in you and around you changes. Everything. But there's always a part of yourself watching the whole show, both what's going on inside you and what's going on around you. And that's how you notice you're upset. If there wasn't that part of you, there would be no one to observe that you're upset. When you're upset, is the observing part of you upset? It's not. There may be another voice that kicks in, and that's the judge, right? And then the judge makes you feel worse about yourself and you get depressed. That's also not the witness. The witness is also witnessing the judge. The problem is we lose sight of the witness and we identify with the judge or with the upset part of the mind. And all of these techniques, the stretching, the breathing, the reflecting, all these things, is it happening now? All of them are designed to awaken the witness. That's what we do.
I can do a little graphic depiction of the witness. Right? Are some of you familiar with the teachings from Raja Yoga?
Yes.
They're Nalini students.
Yes. She's the master of Raja Yoga. Right?
The lover and the divine lover of Raja Yoga.
Raja Yoga basically tells us, one of the most important sutras, that when we calm all the thoughts in the mind, then we begin to experience something beyond the mind. Right? That's yoga. Right? We experience some sense of ourselves, as Vidyanandaji said, that's not the mind. So I created this little way of thinking about it and depicting it, and I'll start by drawing a very nice depiction of a human being. I have a little artistic background. Let me see what I can do here. There we go. And mainly I'm going to focus on this part, where we have all of these thoughts that are interconnected, and every time we get a new thought, we not just receive the thought, but we see where it fits. Do you know what I mean? We see where it fits with all the thoughts that we have already. Something new happens and we think, oh, that's like that. So it goes into this section, right? And when you try to meditate, you experience something like this. Oh, anybody know what I mean?
Yes.
Good. I feel better knowing that. That's number one. So, when we start meditating or witnessing, instead of thinking, part of the mind starts to watch. Say I do this. Say this part of the mind starts watching the other part. And I watch a little bit, and then I get caught up in these thoughts again, and then I remember, oh no, I'm watching now. And I come, you know what I mean? Good, thanks. Yeah. So this part at least is not thinking so much. And then if I keep meditating, and especially if I meditate regularly, and I do some simple breathing and relaxing, because even these mindful movements and the slow breathing help me to calm all of this stuff down, right? Because it can really get going. Right? But if I keep practicing regularly, I get better at it. And now there's a little less thinking and a little more watching. Does that make sense? And maybe this part's repeating a mantra or watching the breath. There are so many different techniques. Witnessing is just one technique. Right? And then, if we keep practicing, it gets a little better. And already this starts to feel better. Right? Have some of you been here before? Yeah? Okay, the thoughts are still there, but there's not quite as many of them. And it feels a little better. Right? And that encourages me to keep practicing. Right? And if I keep practicing, this starts to happen, and I don't know, who knows how far we got, how many of the thoughts got calmed down. Of course, there's still some thoughts going. But what also happens, and this is what I especially like to talk about, what also happens is this starts to happen. Because this also is just a creation of the mind. This idea that I'm a separate person, isolated, I'm this body-mind, you're that body-mind, you're that body-mind, there's no connection, that's all just made up in the mind. Right? Our teacher, Swami Sotogrande, told us we were fine, and then we got defined. So this is how we define ourselves. This is me, and that's you. And as long as I believe in that, and all of these thoughts reinforce it, then it seems real. Right? But actually, when all of this stuff starts calming down and quieting down, I start to feel something that isn't my thoughts. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, Vidyanandaji referred to it. I start to feel something that feels kind of peaceful, and especially when I'm loving someone, right? This sense of separation between myself and the other person doesn't feel like it exists. The very thing that I might love to have, I'm happy to give to them. Do you know what I mean? Something precious for me that I really enjoy and like having, now my happiness comes from giving it to somebody else. So this turns out it's not so real. That's the beauty of meditation practice. And of all of these practices, they start to expose the illusion that we're all separate. And that we have to be self-reliant and take care of ourselves. Right? They start to help us understand that we are, yes, we have to function as a separate being, right? I have to pay the rent myself. I can't say, oh, we're all one. I need some help. I do have to function as a separate being, but at the same time, I can also understand that I'm not completely separate, right? And that my happiness doesn't come just from getting what I want, but also from being loving and giving. So any kind of meditation practice, any kind of practice that we do in the name of yoga, karma yoga, the yoga of giving and serving, bhakti yoga helps us feel this connection with the higher power, with this presence that's not limited this way in the physical, mental realm, right? But it's something much vaster, like an ocean beneath the surface. Right? The mind like the surface, and the ocean that's vast underneath the surface of all the thoughts. When the thoughts get calm, we start to feel this presence that links us all, right? Where we're all connected. And that feels good. That feels wonderful, to feel this sense of connection and compassion for each other. So, bhakti yoga, this path of love, right, and relationship to a higher power, ultimately brings us to the same place as jnana yoga, where we quiet the mind, withdraw from the mind, and experience ourselves as something more than the mind, the awareness behind the thoughts. Right? In both cases, we end up experiencing something beyond the body-mind that helps us feel a connection to a much greater university. Right? A universe that's teaching us. As soon as the mind gets a little quiet and we start to feel something beyond the mind, the mind itself gets influenced by that feeling of peace, or that sense of connectedness. Right? And then it feels natural to be loving and giving, right? Instead of forced. Any comments?
Yeah. Stress is uncomfortable, right? Stress is in itself a type of suffering. Suffering causes stress, and the stress itself is an intensification of the suffering. And all of suffering in the yogic approach is, it happens when we get involved in duality. This is good, that's bad, I'm me, you're you. All of that duality is the layer at which suffering arises. Here's the thing, you see. All right, I'm going to give you a little Bhakti yoga story. I'm going to borrow from the life of Jesus. Jesus decides, the earth is a mess, I'm going to come down and give them some inspiration and help them. So he comes down to earth. Where does he spend his first night? In an upscale hotel? He spends his first night basically in a barn with animals, right? And in his life he has his mission and his teaching. Do the spiritual leaders of his community listen and respect him? Who receives him? The people who are kind of, you know, I mean, really, he hangs out with prostitutes and tax collectors and fishermen, and not the great, this comes up again and again and again and again in the gospel. And we don't really get the point. Where does God show up in our life? In all our together parts, where we're so holy and, you know, professionally holy people? No. I always think I'll feel God's presence when my mind is really calm in a good meditation. And on those rare occasions, I do. But when I sit for meditation, something really interesting happens. It's like I'm a computer, and I have all these files written in my hard drive that are kind of yucky. And as soon as I clear the screen, there's a self-cleaning mechanism that vomits them up, one by one, into the screen of my consciousness, and I think, I'm a bad meditator. That's not supposed to happen when I sit for meditation. Where can you call the divine into your life? Where does that incarnation of God reach out to you? Reaches out to you in all the yucky parts, right? That's where you need the divine the most. And one really great Bhakti yoga technique is you sit down. You know, it can be at your desk, it can be in your car, it can be while you're moving, and you get this yucky feeling. There's nothing wrong with you. That's the moment when it can be very helpful to have some kind of faith and call on the divine and say, look, I'm a mess. This is your job. I can't see you, you can see me. Help! Right? That's my basic prayer. My basic prayer is, would you get off my back? That's why I got into yoga, was to get God off my back, basically. Yeah. So I know that's maybe not as devotional, but the point is, sometimes we forget to pray at those moments when we need it the most. And you don't even have to know who you're praying to. I mean it. You know, that creator that gave us this problem and all our gifts can see me. And I don't even have to know who it is. I can just scream out, hey, help here, right? And then watch what happens. And feeling gratitude for everything you've been given, whatever you call it. If you have a faith, a strong faith, you are truly blessed. If you have faith in a God that, you know, a form of God that is comfortable for you. But in the ultimate analysis, yoga tells us, it is nameless and formless. It cannot be fit into any concept, name, or form that this little mind can fit. How could God possibly be limited that way? So, and you know, I've been trained as a hospital chaplain, and very often people of deep faith when they're going through very, very great illnesses, feel very angry at God. And it was just such a relief to them that a person, a minister, could come in and just let them be angry at God, you know? That's okay, God can take it. So express whatever is in your heart. And remember one thing, have you ever had an experience that seemed like something so terrible and turned out to be really good, that something so great came out of it? I have a dear friend who works mainly with people with cancer. And she said she was reading this book that was on interviews with people who had had cancer and the lessons they learned. And they said they learned that they were so surrounded by love that they really hadn't thought of how many people would come forward and do things for them when they needed them the most. Or that they were stuck in a dead-end job, and because of the cancer they quit it and reinvented their life, and they were so much happier. And she said she read this book chapter after chapter after chapter, and she said, oh my goodness, if you took the word cancer out and you gave it to someone to read, they would say, I don't know what these people had, but I want it. That's how powerful these stories of transformation are. And that's another thing to consciously remember when you're having a hard time. Someone else who went through a hard time and came out the other side better, or when you've had a hard time. Because the truth is, our suffering is from the hand of a higher power to make us get into that state, you know, where we are one, where we are connected, where we are witnessing. And that's another message of Lord Jesus. You know, any being who could be crucified and say, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. You know, whatever faith we have to admit that that's a pretty outstanding human being. And that state of peace is something I want, to be able to say and do that, right? So he is the symbol in a way that the worst can happen, and the ultimate result of any moment of acceptance of whatever happens to us is worthy of resurrection from the dead. Yeah. That any suffering we willingly accept will bring us this transformation into a higher level of consciousness. Okay? So, well, my dear ones, all right, can I sing you a song? It's a stress management song. Your part that you'll learn very quickly is stay strong, keep your faith alive. You know how, I don't know about you, but it looks like the world is kind of falling apart. And there are movies about it, and oh my God, then there's the American election. Yeah, really. So this song, I don't have anyone to play an instrument, so you're going to have to clap. Not too loud because I don't have a big voice, but I'm going to sing a song about Bhakti Yoga. Stay strong, all right? Some say the end is coming. Set our hearts a-running. I say, stay strong, keep your faith alive. If the darkness comes to greet us, you know it won't defeat us. I say, stay strong, keep your faith alive. Raise your hands in the air. Stay strong, keep your faith alive. Lend a hand, say a prayer. Stay strong, keep your faith alive. Hand in hand and side by side, with hearts open wide. I say, stay strong, keep your faith alive. Help others find a way. Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Om. Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Om. Hands in the air, stay strong and keep your faith alive. Lend a hand, say a prayer, stay strong and keep your faith alive. Jai. You can find a much better version of that song online. Durga Das is the person who wrote it, and just go out and put Durga, D-U-R-G-A, Das, D-A-S, stay strong, and boom! You have a fabulous video of all these kirtan people doing a fabulous version. And, you know, put it on your, because that's a real stress manager when you watch that. Thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you.
We wish you the very best.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and giving us a lovely evening.
Thank you all for coming out. We know you've been working and doing all kinds of things, so to, you know, take this time